name is Annie Rogers, and on behalf of the ADDitude team, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's ADHD Experts presentation titled ADHD is a Whole Life, Whole Body Experience. In honor of ADHD Awareness Month, today's webinar will explore the ways in which ADHD is more than the sum of its symptoms. As you know, it's not just about attention or impulsivity or time management. ADHD touches every aspect of our lives, from our emotions and relationships to our sleep and mental health and beyond. We'll explore all that today and talk about why ADHD is misdiagnosed or undiagnosed in women, why the best ADHD tips and tricks can fail, and how to move forward. Leading today's presentation is a great friend to ADDitude, Linda Roggli. Linda is a professional certified coach and the creator of the popular ADHD Palooza series, which includes ADHD women, parents, and couples. She's also an award-winning author and founder of the ADDiva Network for ADHD women 40 and better. She's an internationally recognized expert in midlife and senior ADHD. Linda regularly hosts workshops, organizing groups, and retreats for ADHD women. Linda's book, Confessions of an AD Diva, Midlife in the Non-Linear Lane, won first prize for women's issues in the prestigious Next Generation Indie Book Awards competition. She is the former vice president of ADDA and chairs its webinar series. She lives in Durham, North Carolina, with her slightly OCD husband, one OCD cat, 4 adorable ADHD shelties, and 15 cackling hens. Before I hand over the microphone to Linda, I have just a few housekeeping items. During the live webinar, please submit your questions to Linda at any time in the text box under the video player. To download the slides, click on the event resources section of your webinar screen. And if you're interested in the certificate of attendance option, look for instructions in an email you'll receive about an hour after the live broadcast. A transcript of today's event will be made available in the coming week. If you are listening in replay or podcast mode, visit ADDitudemag.com and just search podcast 427 to access the slides, the webinar replay, and certificate of attendance option, plus that webinar transcript. If you support the work we're doing here at ADDitude to strengthen the ADHD community, we encourage you to visit ADDitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for ADDitude Magazine for your family or to share with a teacher or a loved one who could benefit from greater ADHD understanding. So without any further ado, I'm so pleased to welcome Linda Roggli. Linda, thank you so much for joining us today and for leading this ADHD Awareness Month webinar.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here during ADHD Awareness Month, for heaven's sake. We're all about ADHD all the time, but in particular this month, everybody else is about it too. So there you go. All right, let's jump in, shall we? All right, so I want you to imagine that you have created a massive amount of binary computer code, and we're just going to pretend that you are capable of doing that, all right? And sometimes that program runs, and sometimes it doesn't run so well. And you're really confused. It's like, what's the glitch? What's going on? Why is this not being consistent? So you go to your favorite ADHD guru. You're not your favorite ADHD, your favorite computer guru, and who happens to be 11 years old. And he tells you that I want you to go back to the very, very first line of that code that you've written. And I want you to change the 0 to a 1 and the 1 to a 0. And you're like, well, that's a lot of code to go through, but I'll go back to it. And so you do it. You change it, and then everything shifts. All of a sudden, understanding becomes very clear because, oh, this program is actually supposed to be inconsistent. And I understand so much more about what's going on because when I changed one thing at the beginning of this system, everything else shifted. And that's exactly what happens when you find out about your ADHD. We kind of have this aha moment, but when you look backward at your life, you realize, Oh, that was just ADHD? You mean I wasn't lazy, crazy, stupid, annoying, frustrating, any of those things, ditzy for heaven's sake? It was just my ADHD? Ah, well, whatever. All right. It was ADHD. And then you thought, but if that was all ADHD back there, then what's ADHD now and what's am I doing going forward? So typically when we find out about our ADHD, it's like, oh, we're going to tame this guy. We're going to tame this tiger or lion, and we're going to get this thing fixed, and then we're going to go on and live our life, right? So we throw all the spaghetti against the wall. We try to find the perfect planner, and we get all these productivity hacks, and oh my gosh, we have timers. Does everyone here have at least one timer? I certainly have 5 or 6. We get more organizing tips than we could use in a lifetime. We take medication perhaps, and we even try meditation. And some of all those things stick to the wall, and some of them don't stick. Actually, most of them don't stick, in my experience, because we realize that ADHD, as Annie said, is more than the sum of its pieces and parts. It actually means that those tips and tricks aren't isolated. It is that whole life, whole body experience. Remember that ADHD touches your life from the moment you wake up to the moment you finally go to sleep. And actually, it affects you even during your sleep as well, because it's with you 24/7. 365 days a year, plus an extra bonus day on leap year. And remember, too, that your brand of ADHD is different from that of everybody else. So let's today take a look at how your ADHD life has been touched. Your life has been touched by ADHD and vice versa. So let's jump in. We're going to connect the dots between ADHD and your life. We're going to start with basics. We're going to talk about sleep and food and health, first of all, because those are all kind of intertwined. So let's start with sleep. The little card says, I stay up late every night and realize it's a bad idea every morning. Can anyone out there relate? I can certainly relate, that's for sure. This is often what an ADHD morning looks like. Now, not for all of you, because remember, we're all different. All those cows are different colors. So some of you may pop out of bed in the morning ready to go. But it doesn't mean if you stay in bed or you have trouble going to sleep, it doesn't mean you're a slug in the universe. It's your ADHD. ADHD folks usually, not all, but usually have something called delayed sleep phase syndrome. And it means that we go to bed an average of 90 minutes later than everyone else. And you'll see some little asterisks here. And I have studies that show a lot of the things that I'm talking about today. So I've left all those references at the end of this entire presentation so you can check them out yourself if you'd like to. But remember that 90 minutes is just an average. That means some of us go to bed like 4 or 5 hours later than everyone else. And some of us go to bed only 30 minutes later than everyone else. But for everyone, whether you're ADHD or not, when you're in sleep deficit, it brings on ADHD symptoms. So if you have ADHD and you have sleep deficit, it's like having ADHD times 2 or, maybe 5 or something like that. We turn into 3 of the 7 dwarves. I had all 7 up here originally, and I thought, no, actually, it's really just dopey, sleepy, and grumpy that happens to us when we don't get enough sleep. That's for sure. Our response time is slower. Lack of sleep impacts processing speed. We can be a little crabbier. We might be moody. We might be a little less flexible, and we're usually really flexible. Of course, we have drifting focus. We don't make decisions quite as easily. And obviously, lack of sleep impacts alertness and memory. It also impacts food intake because we think, I don't have enough energy. I'm going to eat some more food. So it also throws our circadian rhythm out of kilter. And it doesn't just happen for the day after. It actually continues to affect that circadian rhythm for several days and sometimes even weeks. And just as a reminder that if you don't get enough sleep one night, you can't make up for it the next night by sleeping longer. It just doesn't work that way. And you can check that out. I don't have studies about that, but I've done lots of research on sleep, and I can promise you that it's true. Don't forget, too, that your ADHD can affect your sleep simply because you are taking stimulant medication. So some people have issues with taking stimulant medication. It keeps them up. Some people take stimulant medication at night to go to sleep. Again, we're all really different. So my question to you is, how does your ADHD sleep affect your life and or your body? And I want to have you just kind of jot just a few notes for yourself here as we go forward, because I want you to have some point of reference so that you might be able to apply this to your life as well. So let's move into food and health. Socrates said it best, and probably first, thou shouldst eat to live and not live to eat. So ADHD eats to avoid boredom and get more energy. Remember, I said that in sleep deficit. Shed negative feelings like eating down your feelings, which only works temporarily, as you probably know if you do that. We eat to procrastinate. We eat to avoid social blunders. I get to eat instead of talking to people. Sometimes I will be so happy when they bring the first course so that I don't have to talk to these people around me. And it also boosts dopamine. We'll talk about that in just a little bit here. Dopamine is, I'm not going to go into all the chemistry of all this, but if you know anything about ADHD, you probably know that dopamine is the one thing that we need most, that we are seeking to help us make strong brain connections, which then allows us to do all the things that we want to do. But connections in ADHD kind of fade a little bit between and among those little synapses and those neurons in our brain. So essentially, we really have a dopamine deficit instead of an attention deficit, or maybe the dopamine deficit can create some attentional problems. So when you take stimulant medication, that's their job, is to increase dopamine, and it strengthens, it actually adds more dopamine to your neurological system. And of course, caffeine also adds a lot of, it also stimulates dopamine, which is why we often use caffeine as a self-medication for ADHD. So when our brains have an opportunity to get more dopamine, we are going to take it, baby, just like this cat grabbing the cheese. And one of the ways that we do that is with simple carbs. ADHD brains love simple carbs because they give you instant access to dopamine. The carbohydrates, which change to sugar almost instantly, go right into your bloodstream, and they stimulate that dopamine. And it's, oh my gosh, I just feel so much better when I'm eating. I won't fill in the blank. I was trying not to be too graphic. I don't want to trigger people who have food issues here. But what happens is that we get on that blood sugar roller coaster. We eat simple carbs and we feel better. And then almost as fast as that high comes on, it leaves us. So we think, oh, I need some more because I'm feeling really dull. And then we go up and down, which is certainly not good for our bodies at any rate. And the truth is, we know what we're supposed to be eating, right? Some nice vegetables would be good. However, we get in a real hurry. Not to mention the fact that ADHD folks know what to do. It's just that we can't or don't do it. We're in a hurry and we grab whatever's there, right? Which means that one of the logical consequences of that is that we are overweight. And there is a very strong connection in all studies that show that there's a connection between being overweight and sometimes even obese and ADHD for the reasons that I just mentioned and others. So if we have that overweight going on, it can lead to other problems like, for instance, fatty liver, or we have increased blood pressure. And I'm not saying this because everybody has all this collection of symptoms is called the metabolic syndrome, but this is specific to ADHD. These are the things that happen for us and have been proven in gold standard studies. We also are far more prone, about 50% more likely to have type 2 diabetes than the general population. And we also have implications for cardiovascular issues like high triglycerides or cholesterol issues. So research has also shown that ADHD has shortened life expectancy. I don't want to be a downer here, but the truth is that why ADHD affects us because we don't follow through on what the doctor tells us to do. And we drive when we're sleepy, as that woman was in that slide earlier. And we do live to eat versus eat to live because of the carbs. We tend to have more accidents, and there's a lot of other health issues associated with ADHD, some of them not fatal, but some of them certainly, like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, they are certainly impactful on our lives. So I mentioned accidents, and I just wonder out there, I won't ask you to raise your hand because we can't see you anyway, but how many of you have lots of bruises on your body? The first line of my book, as Annie mentioned, says, I've stopped apologizing to doorknobs because I run into things all the time. Why is that? And the same thing with my toes. How many of you have broken your little toe because you ran into something? Oh, and how many times have you broken that little toe or sometimes your big toe? The truth is that, we think, oh, well, I'm just clumsy. That's got to be part of ADHD. But it's not necessarily true because our brains are going one direction. We're thinking about our to-do list where our bodies are going another direction. And it's just ADHD. It's not clumsy. It's not another one of those negative, oh, there we go again. ADHD has all these problems. It's just ADHD. So let's scoot on to the immune system, because ADHD also can impact the immune system. And believe me that these connections are not just, oh, I think that, I can just say this. No, there actually are studies that show that ADHD folks have more allergies. They tend to have more trouble with eczema and psoriasis and other autoimmune diseases. So know that if you have those, lots of us have allergies, and lots of us in the general population do, but it happens more often for ADHD. There's something called hypermobility syndrome. And those are the people that you think are like double jointed, like their thumb can go way beyond where it should be, its normal range of motion. And you think, well, gosh, that's really great because you're really flexible, right? The problem with hypermobility syndrome, which is associated with ADHD, is that it can cause pain and it can cause a lot of other structural issues in your body. So it is related. And I've just talked to several people who were surprised to hear that. COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, is also associated with ADHD. And that's not surprising because COPD usually happens because of smoking, and ADHD is associated with, guess what? Smoking. Why do we like to smoke? Because nicotine stimulates dopamine in our systems. Ta-da, back to dopamine and that little cat grabbing all it can. So it's not surprising then that if we continue to smoke, we're more likely to get COPD, therefore our ADHD issues. So then how does ADHD impact your diet, your health, your wellness? And believe me, I just didn't have time to list all the things that ADHD and health have to do with each other, but there are probably more, and you may be wondering about them. And I encourage you to research it yourself to find out if your issues are related to ADHD and how you might be able to handle them. All right, let's go to the second tier. We're going to talk about education and work and life choices and relationships. So first we'll jump into work. Your ADHD probably guides your decision about whether you are going to work outside or indoors, or whether you're going to sit, or whether you need to be moving like our ADHD needs to move, right? Or do we work from home? It's quieter, or sometimes it's quieter. Or do we work on site? Do we need a job that's really stable? Because there are a lot of ADHD accountants out there that like their numbers in nice, neat little rows, and they like that structure. But we also have a lot of ADHD people who like to work in an unpredictable environment, like an emergency room. Maybe some ADHD folks are self-employed because they don't work well in a structured environment. So are you self-employed? And a lot of folks with ADHD that I know will say, if I'd only known earlier, I could have been fill in the blank. And so that leaves us with a little bit of regret. But you also should know that your ADHD choices about your work started really with your ADHD education. And sometimes, did you graduate? Did you graduate from high school or college or graduate school or even 8th grade, for heaven's sake? School is tough for some of us. So did you do really well in school and you got the gold prize? Or did you really struggle like this little girl? Those things are all related to ADHD, which then leads us to other issues. And remember, no matter whether you were good in school, not so good in school, it's not a judgment here. Your ADHD is different. It's not better or worse. It's just different. And don't forget that some of us struggle also with some of those comorbid issues, which we've talked about this month in ADDitude magazine, about like dyslexia and learning disabilities. I have a learning disability called dysgraphia, which I didn't even know that existed when I was in school. And it means I just write really badly. And I just thought I was sloppy, but it's not that. It's just my ADHD. So your education then leads to your job, right? And your job then, we hope, leads to money, because we've all got to have a little money to live. And your money then impacts your living space. Do you live in an apartment? Do you live in the city? Do you live in the suburbs, in a house? Do you live in a hut? I mean, whatever it is. And so where you live can impact your transportation and getting to work and everywhere else. So maybe you're walking or riding a bicycle, or maybe you're taking a car, or you're carpooling with somebody, or maybe you're taking a bus, or you could be in the subway if you live in a big city. And that influences how fast you can get there, right? So, oh my gosh, there's a traffic jam. We can't get to work as quickly as we'd like to. And the cartoon says, are you sure you tried hard enough to be on time? And the man standing there all tattered with his hair all askew. So all of those things work together. It's the circle of your life. And ADHD is right in the center of that life. Now, I want you to think about how ADHD might have impacted your education or your career or your employment. And again, you don't have to spend time, just jot a couple of notes for yourself, just so you don't forget. All right. So then let's move on to relationships, shall we? ADHD, let's talk about intimate relationships first. ADHD was there from the very beginning of your relationship. They were attracted to your ADHD probably for a lot of reasons. I just listed a couple of them here. Spontaneity, like, let's face it, we're kind of a lot of fun, to tell you the truth. We have a great sense of humor. I don't know anybody with ADHD who doesn't have a great sense of humor, because let's face it, if we don't laugh, we'll cry. No, that's not always true, but we do have fun. That's for sure. And we're really affectionate. Many of us are really affectionate. We may not be huggers, but we really are affectionate. And ADHD folks tend to really, really pour on the affection when we're in new relationships. That's for sure. So what were you attracted to in them? Well, you might have been attracted to the fact that they're stable and they're willing to make a commitment to you, et cetera, et cetera. Or perhaps you like the fact that they were really neat-nick. I call it their neat-nickness here. This person has all their clothes arranged Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If only, for heaven's sake. So if you are with someone who has ADHD, life may be a little messier than it might be if you're with someone who is very structured. I'm married to someone, as I said, that's kind of OCD, and yet he's able to tolerate my ADHD. However, remember that when you have an ADHD plus an ADHD, often one ADHD partner is a little bit more structured and the other one's a little bit more wild and crazy, as I am. So sometimes, though, when you have ADHD with not ADHD, a non-ADHD partner, there can be some serious misunderstandings. They don't understand why you didn't listen to them. You're trying to explain that I'm sorry, my brain was going somewhere else, or I meant to take out the trash, and they don't like that very much. So it's not personal. The things that ADHD folks do with a non-ADHD partner or with anyone else, for heaven's sake, is not meant to be personal. We are trying. And I've never met any person anywhere with ADHD who doesn't try their hardest. Eventually, what we come to when you have a happy relationship is a level of acceptance, not tolerance, but acceptance and compassion, and that you share that it's a true partnership, which is just the most wonderful thing, because I'm lucky to have that in my relationship. ADHD might have impacted your decision about whether to have kids or not. Some people with ADHD may say, I don't want to pass ADHD on to my kids. Somebody else say, I love ADHD. I'd love to pass it on. Some people don't care one way or the other, but sometimes ADHD impulsivity decided that for you. Suddenly you have baby ADHD, right? And parenting ADHD kiddos, when you have ADHD yourself, is frustrating, and it can be, it is overwhelming a lot of time. And let's just face it, sometimes it's just freaking hard. But it really is worth it. It's so worth it to have people in your own family, your offspring, who understands what's going on with you. My adult son now says, oh, Mom, it's just our ADHD. So the question is, how does ADHD impact your primary relationship and your probably your nuclear family, if you have one? All right, jot a couple of notes for yourself, if you will, and then we're going to move on to other relationships, like relationships with friends and family. I've been in many situations where everybody else is in their little group. It's a cocktail party or something, and I'm just standing there with my glass of water or whatever I'm drinking. Like, I can't go into that group because they're already together. They wouldn't want me to intrude. It's awkward being in social situations for us. So when we do develop friendships, they're usually in smaller groups or one-on-one. But the truth is that even in those friendships, we can blurt out things that are, brutally honest, and it's not very well appreciated. So it's sometimes hard for us to keep friendships because we don't mean to. Again, it's not personal. But we really all need friends who get it. Like these two guys both have on masks, and they've got cucumbers on their eyes, and they're having a little drink, and they're having a great time. We need friends who really do understand us, especially friends who can be there for us when things have gone badly. And they can offer that shoulder to cry on, or they can be there to cheer with us when things go right. You can't change your friends. Let me say that differently. You can change your friends, but you can't change your family. Now, some of us would like to. Some of us may not have anything to do with our families, and that's a whole different issue. But oh, yes, the family. They do have their opinions, don't they, about our ADHD? They believe in ADHD, which is lucky, but they don't think you have it. Oh, you graduated from college. You couldn't have it. Or they believe in ADHD, but they don't believe they have it. Oh, yes, they do. They believe in ADHD, but they think only children have it. They don't believe in ADHD, but they're just fascinated by your information. Are you sure that's really true, or is that sarcasm? It's a little questionable there. Or they don't believe in ADHD and they don't want to hear about it ever again. Leave me alone. And in that case, you actually have to kind of either skirt the issue or you skirt the person, that's for sure, which is sad among families. Families often see you as you were, not as you are today. Because if you were diagnosed later, you didn't know it was ADHD. Remember that rear view mirror? We didn't know about ADHD. Now you understand it more. And now you may not be completely different, but you do get what's going on. They don't get it often. It's hard to break that stereotype that they have of you from way back when. The most sympathetic family members are people who have kids with ADHD and often are diagnosed with ADHD themselves, which happens a lot, as you well know. You take your kiddo for diagnosis and all of a sudden, aha, you have that moment that happened earlier. So then the question is, how has ADHD affected your friend and family relationships? Give that a little thought. Something may have come up while I was talking about it. Just jot yourself a couple of notes so that you can come back to it and at least let this be a launching point for some conversation or some thinking about it for yourself. Let's talk about the relationship between ADHD and women. And I know I'm kind of taking a little divergence here from general ADHD, but there are some special issues with women that I think we need to talk about. ADHD girls are often missed in an ADHD diagnosis. You notice this little girl's kind of, she's either bored or she's checked out, whatever's going on. Everybody else is like eager to answer the question. But that's because about 70% of ADHD girls are diagnosed with inattentive presentation. And even if they're not diagnosed, they may have that presentation. It means that the dreamy, creamy, the look out the window kind of thing. And it's partly the ditzy kind of people, because you talk to them and they're like, huh? They're not even paying attention to what you say. But even hyperactive little girls who may be chatterboxes are rarely diagnosed with ADHD because they're expecting, the stereotype is they're expecting boys to be rowdy and little girls are, oh, they're just chatting to their friends. Instead, little girls are often diagnosed with depression or anxiety. And it's not just little girls, it's also big girls like us who are also generally seen as being depressed or anxious, or some of the other things that go along with ADHD, which you've heard about this month. ADHD girls and women actually tend to be people pleasers. So that means they're trying to make you happy, which means that they may be hiding who they truly are. And that becomes a lifelong commission for them. ADHD boys blame other people for their mistakes. ADHD girls blame themselves. And I want to go back to that because that is the picture of the dog ate my homework, just so you know. All right. ADHD girls blaming themselves. It's not that something happened over here and, oh, that's too bad. It's that I caused that. And not only did I cause it, I'm a bad person. And this is a heartbreaking lifetime of self-recrimination and shame and beating yourself up. Just ask any 60-year-old woman who's been diagnosed with ADHD, and she will tell you, they will tell you, I hated myself for years and may still. So the best results for ADHD is the earlier it's treated, the better the results are, and the more likely a girl or anyone is to be able to overcome some of those ADHD issues. But then we add in the powerful influence of estrogen, and that has amazing and astonishing effect on ADHD for women. Certainly every month, that's 7 days or 9 days or however many days it is. Estrogen over the lifespan starts out in childhood. It's pretty stable, and we all women and men are born with a certain amount of estrogen in our bodies, but women tend to have more, females tend to have more. And then as you go into your puberty years and your teen years, it bumps up just a little bit, and you'll see that it goes up and down and up and down, and then it shoots up sky high. And the highest estrogen is usually when you're in your 20s and your 30s. But then, of course, that's, you're having your periods up and down, whether they're regular or not. And then we'll talk a little bit about the other peaks in just a moment. I have a closer slide of that. So when you are in that monthly cycle, when your estrogen's really high, it's really helping make connections in your brain, especially the prefrontal cortex. That's that part right behind your forehead. And you can really focus. You're feeling good. It's like, okay, I can do this. And then toward the end of the month, right before you start bleeding, it's like all havoc breaks loose, right? You can't think. The sky is falling, all that stuff. And that's because your estrogen is really low and your ADHD symptoms are really high. And it's really a cruel joke that for about 2 weeks of the month, we're great. And 2 weeks of the month, we're not so great. So sometimes it's because stimulant medication doesn't work as well when you don't have estrogen. Sometimes doctors will prescribe additional stimulant medication, or some of them have found out that a short course, not a long course, but a short course of an SSRI antidepressant actually will get you through that period of time. So if you have those issues, you may want to check with your doctor about either one of those. The other thing that happens with ADHD and the estrogen issue, and in particular our monthly cycle, is that PMS and PMDD are more severe. So for ADHD women, it's about 45%. For the general population, it's about 28%. And PMDD stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And this is way too complicated to slide, and I'm not going to read all this to you. But you'll just see how many ways this affects your body and your psyche. So know that if you have PMDD, what I've heard, and anecdotally only, is that sometimes that antidepressant is given for PMDD. Migraines, hormonally related migraines or otherwise, are also ADHD related, and it's particularly true for women. So let's go back to estrogen again. When you're pregnant, your estrogen goes through the ceiling and you're feeling great. And you may feel great because, oh, I'm having a baby or whatever it is. But those first 2 trimesters are good. And then the third trimester, progesterone sticks its little head up even higher than estrogen. And progesterone can cause kind of a foggy brain. It calms us down, but it kind of makes us sleepy a little bit. So right after delivery, that estrogen goes to the bottom, even lower than it was before you had baby. So you can imagine what that does to our ADHD. And it's really bad timing for ADHD women. Let's face it here. We've got a brand new baby. We may have other kiddos in the household to take care of. We're not getting much sleep. This poor woman is sitting, and I don't know, anybody who's had a baby may recognize I'm sitting in the bathroom holding the baby because I got no other time to go to the bathroom. So a lot of times if you're still nursing, estrogen is still depressed. So the ADHD symptoms are not great. And a lot of you don't want to take ADHD medication when you're nursing, which is understandable. The good news is that oxytocin comes in and you get a little bump of that while nursing. It's not the same as dopamine, but it makes you feel better temporarily. Then we move on past pregnancy and reproductive years to midlife and menopause, and ADHD plays a tremendous role in here. And this is the end of that graph I showed you earlier, where we have these really wide swings of estrogen up and down and up and down. But notice here, instead of going up and increasing in strength as it did at puberty, it's gradually decreasing in strength so that it kind of bumps along at the bottom at the very end. So when we don't have much estrogen, this is true for anybody with or without ADHD. You may have some brain fog and you might have memory lapses, but for ADHD, again, it's doubled. You get distracted and irritable. Of course, hot flashes are not related to ADHD, but they are related to estrogen, and they certainly are distracting. So this is the reason a lot of ADHD women are diagnosed at midlife, which is why I work with women who are 40 and better, because that's when a lot of this happens. Perimenopause can start 10 years before the date of your last ever period, which who knows when that's going to be, right? So a lot of women say, what took so long to figure this out? Again, we're looking in that rearview mirror, maybe with some regret, maybe with some anger, but maybe with some relief of, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. Sometimes, not all the time, you can supplement with estrogen. This happens to be an estrogen patch. If it's medically appropriate, and this is certainly not me advising this, you need to check with your doctor. And some of us simply can't do estrogen supplements because of other health issues. So the question is, how have hormones impacted your ADHD life? And of course, this is a question for women only or people with a uterus. So jot yourself, I bet you, a lot of you out there are going, oh yeah, I didn't know it was that. So yeah, ADHD really does impact our lives in all ways. So here's just a bunch of miscellaneous things. And I just want to warn you that I didn't talk much about emotion today because that's kind of a whole webinar and podcast into itself. But we're going to talk about a bunch of other stuff that might be impacting your life with ADHD. Time blindness. I know you've heard that phrase before, and this guy's looking at his watch. What is time blindness? Well, what we do is tend to underestimate the duration of time. Like, in other words, if someone said, oh, well, how many minutes has it been? And we say 3, and it's actually been 7, or the other way around. And we also underestimate the amount of time it takes to complete a task. We think, oh, I can get that done in, 10 minutes, and it takes 3 hours. So that's an ADHD issue, and it certainly impacts us a lot. This is a quote from a famous actress whose name I just can't remember, but she said, I lost 13 minutes back in 1989, and I still haven't found them again. And that feels a lot like what happens with us with ADHD. We lost that time. We can't get it back. So I was thinking, okay, I have 15 minutes to leave before I need to leave for my appointment. And I start out the door and it's like, oh no, there's something I have to do for work. And okay, but I need a bottle of water because I'm going to be gone 2 or 3 hours. And I go out, I forgot the bottle of water, and I go out the door again. Oh, then the cat threw up on the floor and I have to clean that up. And finally I'm only 7 minutes late, and I can make that up if I'm speeding. Does this sound familiar to you? Because it does to me. Let's talk about your ADHD style. Yes, you actually have an ADHD style, and it has to do with what you wear on your ADHD body. A lot of us are allergic to things that are too tight, or they're scratchy or itchy, or they're the fabric feels bad against our skin, or we don't want something that's really complicated. We need things that are not fussy. I don't want to wear scarves and a bunch of jewelry and all that kind of good stuff. So, and those tags, then the back of shirts, aren't you glad they finally are printing them? But even then, some of the print is a little itchy as well. So let's talk about your pets, because ADHD folks tend to have pets. I don't care whether it is a turtle or whether it's a St. Bernard or even just a plant. ADHD pets calm us down a little bit, and they're not judgmental. We love that because we need something that's not judgmental. And what they've proven in studies is that when you pet an animal, it brings down blood pressure, which is one of the reasons they use them in assisted living homes and folks who are in nursing homes. ADHD is great in a crisis. Sometimes it's a real emergency, and we're great with that. There are a lot of ADHD firefighters out there. And sometimes it's an emergency we create all by ourselves because we're skidding up against that deadline just right into there. And yes, we created it, but we're blaming ourselves. Why did I do this? I should have done an outline, blah, blah, blah. We have great ideas, and we have a lot of great ideas. Even when other people have kind of given up on the problem, we think outside the box and we solve problems. And we are like little terriers. We are just going to worry that problem to death until we figure it out. And we like it because it is engaging and it creates our dopamine surge because it's interesting to us. Remember, ADHD loves interesting. Maybe we can even come up with a better mousetrap, although that's a little different kind of mouse. ADHD is absolutely resilient. We fall off of that horse, but we get on it again, and we get on it again, and we get on it again, because we know that we can do this better next time. So we are so resilient. ADHD is really sensitive, and that comes in a whole host of packages. Rejection sensitive dysphoria, you hear a lot about these days, thanks to Dr. William Dodson. That's getting our feelings hurt when someone else may be not even looking at us, and suddenly we interpret that as being something that they have said about us. But it also means that we're really intuitive, and we really have a lot of empathy for other people. We actually can take care of other people, and partly that is because we realize that we would like to be taken care of, and therefore we see it in other people. But we can also be sensitive to smells. Like, this is cilantro. A lot of people can't stand cilantro. I love it. But tastes and textures, some people can't stand like the texture of oatmeal or something. We're sometimes sensitive to really bright light or loud sounds, or just a lot of noise around us. It doesn't have to be really loud. It just be a lot of commotion. We get overwhelmed. So I've just touched the surface here, but what kind of other ways does ADHD touch your life? Many, many, many ways. Maybe some that you hadn't connected all to ADHD, which is, again, the advantage of that rearview mirror. So I just want you to know that when you work so hard, throwing all that spaghetti against the wall, meaning all the strategies, all the tips, all the tricks, it's like, this one's got to work. I know if I could just get a different planner, it'll be fine. When you do that, you're tending to focus on what's wrong with your ADHD life and how you need to fix it, as in taming that big animal up there, that tiger. So I invite you today to give your ADHD some credit. You already have strategies that work. Even back in that rearview mirror, you had strategies that you had set up. You didn't even know they were strategies then. In fact, some people say, what are your ADHD strategies? I'm like, I don't know, because they're just built into me. They're baked in. They're just who I am, and that's just how I live. So you already have strategies that work for you. Keep them, notice them, and appreciate them. Because the truth is that 98% or more of your life is working. That was a phrase that I learned when I was in coaching training. And I thought, oh, are you kidding? Because I tended to be a real pessimist, to tell you the truth. And so the 98% or more that's working, just as an example, you're watching or listening to this podcast. You have some time to enhance your life or listen to things about ADHD. You know how to get on the internet. That in itself is a miracle, right? There was hot water that came out of the spigot, or cold water, or maybe you could choose whichever one it was. You took a shower and brushed your teeth. And okay, maybe this isn't the day for that, but no judgment here. You take a shower or brush your teeth sometime, right? All those things mean your life is working. But when we focus on that 2%, it just seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we only look at what's wrong and what we need to fix. So I invite you to get off of the hamster wheel today, even if it's just for today, to give yourself a break, because you have wisdom in yourself, in your body, and you can trust that wisdom. Believe me, you can trust it. Your ADHD deserves a little respect. It's not a little mosquito that's just pesky and running around trying to suck your blood and you're trying to swat at it. It's more like your alter ego, right? And the truth is that you probably really like that little part of you that's kind of different. I mean, who wants to be boring? Who wants to be ordinary and normal, right? Except maybe occasionally, right? If you fight your ADHD, it's only going to make both of you really unhappy. So, you know that phrase about keep your friends close and your enemies closer? If ADHD is your enemy, if you consider it an enemy, then I invite you to bring it closer. Because remember, it's going to stay with you. It's still there 24/7, no matter how many strategies and spaghetti you throw. 365 days plus one. So link arms with your ADHD. Walk down the yellow brick road together and give it a little hug now and then. Your ADHD is you. Are you your ADHD? You're not defined by it, but you certainly live with it. And I invite you to just simply be ADHD. Because you are an amazing, amazing individual. You are unique, not only with your ADHD, but in every other way as well. So allow yourself to just fall into contentment every now and then and just be. And I'd like to end today with one of my favorite poems by a wonderful poet who passed away a couple of years ago, Mary Oliver. You may know this poem as well, but I'm just going to read it to you anyway. It's called The Journey. One day, you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles, mend my life, each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundation, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. Thank you so much for being with me today. I will show you that these are all the references, and I think we want to go back and we have time for questions, right, Annie? We got time for questions?
Yes, we sure do, Linda. Oh my goodness. I'm not the only one who has a couple of tears in my eyes. Okay. So yes, we will get to questions right now. And the first one, I actually want to start by reading a couple of comments because I feel like we are so blessed here at ADDitude with our community. And our team at ADDitude is struck on a daily basis with just how amazing this community is. So I want to read just a few questions. Someone wrote and said, I'm in tears. Thank you so much for this. I'm always trying to fix myself. And another person said, not a question, just a huge thank you. I was diagnosed during the pandemic at 48 years old. It's good to know I'm not alone.
Oh, honey, no, not by a long shot. No, I'm going to be in tears.
No, that's not my, but, so, please, everyone know you're not alone. We are in this together. And then this next question, I think it's on a lot of people's minds. Someone wrote simply at the end here, how do we get rid of the shame?
How do we get rid of the shame? And that's a great question. And if I had the answer, I could just wave my magic wand and make it go away. But first, it's acknowledging it. At least this is my take on this, because I lived in shame for so many years. And I had to finally face it. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like I kept running away from it. No, I'm a bad person. I'm just, and I would just sit there and literally just take on, I don't know about you, but if I was in a room, I would take on all the guilt in the entire room. It's all my fault. If somebody dropped something, oh, what did I do? It's my fault. So the shame piece is really about, number one, this being here. So thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you. That's number one, is knowing that you're not alone. Number two, being realistic, stepping back from it a little bit and saying, you know what? Is everything in the world my fault? No, it is not. So what I have learned to do over the years is to say, wait a minute. There are two, and I'm just going to talk about people. There are two people here, and I'm going to take responsibility for my part of this, and I'm going to let that person take responsibility for their part, because originally I would take responsibility for all of it, and it was crushing. I walked around with a black cloud over my head, and no wonder I wasn't a very fun person to be around. But, and certainly let me mention one more thing. It's certainly important. The shame is one of the things that therapists are great at. Therapists really work with the side issues of ADHD. But sometimes when we have made the same mistake 15 times, it's like, when am I ever going to get it? It's like butting your head against the wall again and again and again. It's like, I give up. It's why a lot of us stop trying, because we don't want to fail. So what I think that we need is somebody outside us reflecting back to us what's going right. I just got off of Zoom with a client in England, and she started out just feeling so badly about herself. And I'm not taking credit for this. She did all the changing, trust me on this. But it's really great to have someone, whether it's a coach or a therapist or even just a non-judgmental friend or family member, to hold up a mirror and say, look at who you are. Look at the things that you have done right. And that's what I insisted she do today. Well, I was going to say all the things I didn't do. And I said, I want to hear all the things you did do. And one of the things she did was get a puppy. Oh, yay. So puppies are good for that too. Puppies are good for shame because they don't judge. But so I have tears in my eyes when you talk about shame, because I live it. I still live it. And I so empathize. My heart goes out to you. So it can get better. I promise you. I promise.
And that's actually a wonderful segue into another big question. And that is just, how can coaching really augment a treatment plan? When is it sort of most appropriate and helpful?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate it, because coaches are different from therapists, although some therapists do some coaching. They kind of combine things. So we want to be really clear that they are not the same thing, even though they are often done one-on-one and sometimes in groups. But coaching, I have a little questionnaire on my website that says, "Are you ready for coaching?" And one of the things that is on that is on that site is, do you take responsibility for what's going on in your life? Because a lot of us are blaming other people, just like that dog ate my homework kind of thing. I just read something that said, I don't have enough time is the adult equivalent of the dog ate my homework. I'm not sure that's true or not. However, let's go back to coaching. I'm ADHD. We took a little jump over there. Okay. So coaching is really, it can be several things. Some people go to coaches for outside accountability. And frankly, for ADHD folks, we unfortunately can't trust ourselves to honor our own promises to ourselves. And that's one of the reasons that we do have shame, to tell you the truth. But having somebody on the outside, the coaches are trained to look at the positive things that are going on and to help you stay accountable by re-emphasizing what's going right, and then helping problem solve what didn't work. If you weren't able to do the task that you said that you were going to do last week, like we set commitments every week, then what got in the way? It could be that maybe you didn't have time, but it could be that it was just too big of a job, and we need to back up a little bit and take one piece of it first, because when we see a sheer face of a mountain, we need some kind of a handhold in there. So I think that coaching does a tremendous job of reducing shame. I think it does a tremendous job of building self-esteem and accenting what is right. So I have clients who are both in therapy and in coaching. Their therapist handles a lot of the deeper things that are maybe more family related, that may go back into their history or those kind of things. Coaching, on the other hand, is more about what's going on right now and how do you move forward. I am not a tips and tricks coach. There are a lot of tips and tricks coaches out there. So if that's what you want and you want to implement some of those, that's a great place to do it too. So coaching can be a lot of things to different people. And what complicates it is that coaches approach this differently. So it's really important, if you're looking for a coach, to find someone, first of all, who's trained in ADHD and has life coaching background as well. It also is important to talk to more than one of them. It's really about the fit, just like it is with the therapist. And then finally, to make sure that you really have time for coaching, because sometimes it's like, well, I just got to go get a coach because I just can't handle everything. If you add one more thing to your list, maybe that's not going to help. If you add one more financial, burden to your financial situation, that may not be good. It might be bad, unless that person is actually going to help you get out of the financial mess that you might be in. So don't forget that there are coaches that have just graduated from coach training school, which are less expensive, and there are coaches who have been around for 20 years, like I've almost been around for 20 years, who are more expensive. And there also are coaching groups, which is what I do when I have people who can't afford private coaching, but we do coaching groups. So there's lots and lots and lots of help out there. But I just want to be sure that you understand that, just as in everything else, there are great coaches and there are coaches that are not so great for you. And I know I said a lot more than you probably wanted to hear, but I'm pretty passionate about coaching, and it's what saved my life. I worked with an executive coach who didn't even know about ADHD, nor did I. And we almost came to blows when she was trying to teach me how to do Excel. But she also taught me so many life lessons. And I was in therapy at the same time. And she said, I'm not going to work with you unless you're in therapy, because I was a mess, frankly. I've been in therapy forever. And what I learned from her was actually, for me at that point, more important than what I got out of therapy. So I'm not putting down therapists at all. I have spent a lot of money and a lot of time with them, and they have done wonders for me. So that's a really long answer. Do we still have time for more questions?
I loved that answer. That answer was incredible. And now I have a tricky one that's an add-on to that.
Oh, dear.
Okay, we have a number of loved ones here today who really want to help their spouses, children, sisters, brothers. Mm-hmm. Can you offer some advice for help starting these conversations for people with people who are not necessarily open?
Ooh, now that was a little wrench in there that you said. I
know, I'm sorry about that, but it does seem to be the case here.
But honestly, a lot of times it's the other way around. Is the ADHD person is trying to have the conversation with their family member, and the family member doesn't want to hear it, as I said on the slides. The other way around is that I will tell you that ADHD folks have created this wonderful barrier around themselves to protect themselves. And if you say, I want to help you, they're going to say, I don't need help, because inside there, they know, oh my God, I need help, but they can't give it to me because A, they're going to judge me. B, they're not going to know what kind of help I need. For instance, my husband is not ADHD. And when I had my advertising agency some 20 years ago, things needed to be cleaned out in the files, and I had to clean them out. And I dragged everything out of the files. I would end up with this pile 4 feet tall of all the files that I needed to go through. It was 8:30 at night, and I had to have them all back in there by the time my employees came the next day. So I would invite my husband over, and he did nothing. He did nothing. He would read his medical journals. He's a physician. He would sometimes bring me dinner. So that's called body doubling. So you may offer to simply say, I see you struggling with that. I know that you may not want some help, but can I just be here with you so that you don't feel like you're alone? That's number one. Number two is remember that big barrier that they all have. And let me just say that when my husband did that, I felt like I wasn't drowning. I felt like I could, okay, good. Somebody else is here. I'm not going to fall off the end of the earth here. But when he wasn't there, I felt like I'm never going to get this done. And I felt hopeless. I guess that's it, and helpless. So another way to invite this conversation is, and this kind of depends on what you've tried before, because if you've tried and it's bounced off, if it's bounced off of you, and especially if it's an adult. With a kiddo, it's a little bit different. But with an adult, if you're talking to a spouse, for instance, if you say, the conversation can be something like, I know we talked about your ADHD before, and I know that you really don't want me to get in there. But what I see is it's sometimes so hard for you. And I just want you to know that I'm here for you in whatever way I can be here for you. And I just want you to know that I'll support you in whatever you need. So you can trust that I'm not going to judge you. And you can trust that I will help in the way that I can. But don't be surprised if that ADHD person doesn't know how in the world you can help them. Because if you start messing with my piles, I'm going to kill you, because I know kind of what's in those piles. Do not touch my piles. Do not touch them. That's the thing about ADHD. It's like we kind of know where things are, and it may look like a mess, but we have our own little organization or disorganization system in our head. So you start messing with it. It's not helpful to do that. So it's really asking, what would work for you? How can we open the door to this? Because it's just so painful for me. And I know I've tried in the past and it hasn't worked, but I just want you to know I'm not going to bug you, but I'm going to check in with you every now and then to see, is there anything that I can, take on for you? No, because I have to do it just my very own way. That's another issue with ADHD folks, is that they feel like, I not only have to do it myself, but I have to do it myself because it has to be done in exactly the way I want it to be done. And often there's an element of perfectionism in there. And perfectionism stops all of us, but especially for ADHD folks, it's like, well, just to go back to my client in England today, she moved into a new house. They're doing all kind of renovations. And she thought, I want to set up this amazing filing system that's really complicated. And I can put all the receipts from this floor and there and that kind of stuff. Instead, what she did was create a couple of folders on her Dropbox, And she labeled one kitchen, and she just put all the kitchen receipts in there. And then she put all the things for the bedroom and the next one and the next one. And she said, if I had spent all that time creating this complicated system, which ADHD folks like to do because it's interesting, she said, if I had done that, I wouldn't have been able to find where the things would needed to be filed. And then I just wouldn't have done it at all. So the receipts would be everywhere. Now she did something really simple. So know that ADHD folks sometimes like to complexify things, which is my word for that. And if they do, you can say, okay, then if it's too big, is there a little piece around here that I can do? My husband, for instance, brings me water when I'm in the midst of creating PowerPoint slides for the 4th time for ADDitude magazine. It's just those little tiny things that can make a huge difference. And believe me, I know that if you've been rebuffed and rebuffed and rebuffed, it's hard to start over. But those are the words I'd use. Can we start over? Because I know it's been hard, and it's hard for me to understand. And I know that you might feel bad about some things, but I just want to just clear the decks and just start over again. Everybody just take a breath and know that this is what's going on for me. And that's the last thing I want to say about this, is that make this not about you. You don't take out the garbage, and you don't, I just want to help. Can I take out the garbage for you? Because you don't do this, and I see you doing this. Make this about you. what I experience is that I feel so sympathetic when things don't go well. I know that for me, what works for me over here is this, and I know that's different for you. So make sure that you're not doing the accusing finger kind of thing, but instead speaking from your own heart and your own experience so that you can open that door even just a little crack. And don't be surprised if it doesn't happen the first time or the fifth time. You need to be consistent about it, even if they aren't consistent, because then that's the one way that they will learn to A, trust you, and B, accept the help that you may be able to give.
Mm. Now, I am very sad to report that we are just at time here. I know we had a number of people ask what to do when their family members think that ADHD is an excuse for everything. I will butt in and say, maybe try to get them to watch this webinar on replay. It will be available for replay. I think that it could help, those of you who have children who are pushing back and relatives who are pushing back. Because Linda, I know that you touched all of us here today, and I'm very hopeful that you could do the same to really illuminate some of those loved ones out there who are still on their journey with ADHD and learning about it. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Linda, thank you. This was a really incredible presentation. You warmed a lot of hearts and caused a lot of tears to be shed. If you're listening here today, I will remind you that ADDitude, we have weekly webinars, and we actually have a special conversation tomorrow. And that is about eating disorders and body image in teens. So if you are a parent who is concerned about this, ADHD or not, that will be tomorrow. But we hope you join us for all kinds of webinars, and keep updated by subscribing to our newsletters at attitudemag.com/newsletters. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and happy ADHD Awareness Month.